everyone, and welcome to the final video of the calendar year. We've got 3 pieces of business on the agenda for this video. First, the power of peer observation. Second, Oval 2 in the standards-based planning process. How will students and I know they are successful? And third, timely reminders and suggestions for things to do with your mentee.
And let's get going. I think we all know that peer observation isn't something that's new. And in fact, it's become common enough that it's a required part of many induction programs that we see across the country. As Jeff and I were thinking about this, we thought, well, why peer observation? Why has that lasted? And number one, it contributes to a collaborative culture. I think about the notion of private teaching versus public teaching. Opening our doors to each other and learning from one another, asking questions, trying things out in front of each other is a powerful contributor to culture. The second thing, why? Peer poaching, it's a place. Did you hear that? Peer poaching. That's a term we use, and it's like so cool because it's what teachers do. We gather new ideas. We find different ways of implementing things. We can't help ourselves. We go into a classroom and we see so many things there to poach. And third, it supports learning. Seeing instruction in action, seeing how a teacher works with this particular student, seeing how learning stations are set up. All of that in action has been identified by teachers in multiple studies as a key way they prefer to learn. So it helps with implementation. It helps when you have teachers that have gaps in experience. And you know, there are so many ways to do this. It's not like there's just one formula for peer observation. So grab your green book, grab your stickies, grab your highlighters, and Jeff's going to take you on a little walk.
Yeah, so pages 184 through 192 in the 21st Century Mentor's Handbook describe many types of peer observation. There are many possibilities, some that you've thought of, others perhaps not. Of course, things like mentee observing the mentor and the mentor observing the mentee. But what about if you, as the mentor, arrange for your mentee to go see someone else who happens to do it well? How about going and doing some co-teaching? And that way you're sort of observing each other live in the moment. Of course, use technology, make a recording, and then you can leisurely take a look at it and analyze what you see. There are also some ways, some maybe non-traditional or less obvious things you can do. Don't forget the power of observing special educators and what they do and the insight that they have with students. There are also ways you can learn about the non-teaching things that happen, parent conferences, special ed conferences, those kind of things. How about observing those? And what about following a teacher or student around, shadowing them? A lot can be learned about what a student or a teacher goes through by shadowing.
And there's pages that Jeff went through that you'll find. Just mark them, turn the video off, and pay attention. Take some time studying those. While you have your book open, if you look at pages 189 to 190, you'll see some options for learning walks. And I love those. I'm a fan because it's mentor-mentee walking together. So you may go see a third classroom together. And I just think there's a power in the conversation before and after those opportunities. Now, one additional one you may not have heard of is the ghost walk. Now, if you're in a culture, that where teachers are a tad reluctant to have other adults in the classroom when there are students present, it's one way to get inside of classrooms, get those doors open to one another. So if I were doing ghost walks, I would either do them before or after school. I could do them on a teacher work day or conference day. I think they are a great benefit because there's no sub coverage that's required. Now, you're not going to see action with kids, but you could see, depending on what the teacher needs to see, how a room is set up for learning. You might look for signs of literacy emphasis across classrooms. You might look at how teachers in the building are displaying student work. There's also this mountain of materials and resources and paper that sometimes starts to accumulate about now. And so maybe you're looking for efficiency tips while you're walking in classrooms. How do they manage those things? Can you tell what routines students have by jobs assigned or where they place things? So there's so many things you can look for as you begin the ghost walk. Now, I did say the word look for, and I want to come back to that. So if you're going to plan, and I'm sure you are, observations and peer observations and any of these strategies we're talking about, if you want to amplify what's going on, you start with look fors. Before the observation, decide together, what's the challenge area for the teacher? What are they looking for? What are they grasping? Could you use a rubric? Could you use something like the Charlotte Danielson placemat that's a one-pager? You can have the teacher identify, where they're struggling. Could it be that there's a new curriculum in literacy or math, for example, and they need to see certain pieces of it implemented? How a teacher does this, this, and this. Going in with a set of look fors does amplify what the possibilities are for getting clear and collecting the data that needs to be collected.
Yeah, Brenda, if we don't go in, beginning with the end in mind, right? If we don't go in with a purpose, we may well be distracted by that fancy bulletin board or the displays in the classroom, and we lose focus on what it is, why it is we're doing the peer observation. There's also a tool we've got for you from the 21st Century Mentor's Handbook, Peer Observation with Purpose, helping you have areas of focus that will guide really a standards-based observation, right? Having standards for the observation, just as we have standards for the lessons and things we want to do. Brenda, you mentioned Charlotte Danielson's framework for teaching. That might be what your districts use. It might be that you use Kim Marshall's framework. You might use the NICET, whatever it is. That's another tool in addition to the look for tool that we're sharing with you from the book that can help you focus in on teaching and learning when you do your peer observation.
So I'm going to take it to another level. It's awesome that we have indicators of what we're looking for. We've got this little list of 2 or 3 things that we're really hunting for. But let's talk about unpacking them before we go in the classroom so that both you and your mentee have the same picture of what good looks like. Let's pretend that your mentee is looking for engagement strategies. They're trying to see students who are highly engaged in their learning. That's a common one that lots of teachers want to see. So I'd make a T-chart right up front before we go in. And on that T-chart, I'd start with students. So what is it we expect to see if we're going to find really strong engagement? If students were engaged in the classroom, what would we see and hear? Now, my mentee and I would generate that list and talk about it so that, again, our pictures are the same of what we're looking for. Then I would shift into a teacher focus, a second T-chart, and I would say, if students are engaged at high levels in the classroom, what will we see? What will we hear in respect to teachers? I know it's a little work up front, but it will help the teacher use that time, that observation time, more efficiently. They'll be more clear about what you're looking for. So you've got one more thing to consider as you plan your observations, and I know some of you are scrambling for that about right now. But you have this notion at the end of the observation to pull it together with a reflection, a conversation with your mentee. You want to be able to have a template that they can use to gather notes while they're in the classroom. You want to bring it back, talk about the data that they collected, see what surfaced, what didn't surface. If something's missing, you can maybe bring it up if it's value added, but it might be ahas, questions, ideas to use in my classroom. That's a fabulous one because there's some transfer right there. So inside tip for you as I finish this piece, I want you to think about this. Who's doing the talking when you're reflecting? sometimes if you're running out of time, there's an impulse to just dive in and share everything you saw. And that's not going to help as much as if you step back, ask some good reflective questions, and allow them to think it through. The next time that we meet after this video, we're going to talk about something called the 3 C's, which are this continuum for interaction, and we'll talk a lot about reflection. But for right now, that's what we're talking about with observation.
Peer observation is not an extra. It's not a luxury item that maybe you can do as a mentor. It's a critical action for you and your mentee to take together. And we know it's not easy to find the time. It's harder than ever because perhaps guest teachers, substitute teachers are rare in your building, but you've got to find a way to do it. It might be teachers covering for each other, coaches, if you have instructional coaches, they can cover teachers to let you do that. How about your principal covering for you or your mentee, right? Let's let them do that, step up and do that too. I hope they're ready and willing to do that with you. Maybe you do have substitutes in your building. Maybe they're needed for part of a day sometimes, but not all of it. Make this important. That's what we're trying to say. Make it happen. Don't let it be something that you don't get to. This is so important. We are completely convinced that you will find it rewarding and worthwhile if you do it. You will be glad you did afterwards. And you know what? There's always technology you can use to record a lesson or something, watch it together, and talk about it. Bottom line, do it, do it, do it. Especially now, it may seem crazy to try to do it during the kind of holiday time. That makes it all the more important. Find time, and you will be convinced about the power of peer observation. In the last couple of months, we've been reminding you about standards-based planning practice in case your mentee can use some help with their planning. After all, that's our job as mentors, is to help our mentees. 2 months ago, we shared a model of standards-based planning that we lovingly refer to as the ovals. Last time we were together in a video, we provided a detailed explanation of the first oval. What should students know, be like, and be able to do? As a mentor, you can drive home the importance of being crystal clear about the learning goals before your mentee makes any instructional moves. Direct them to your district-specific language for the essential or power standards and learning targets that your district uses. Your district's version could differ from the district where they previously taught. No matter what, remind them to begin with the end in mind. This month, we want to provide greater explanation for Oval 2. How will students and I know they are successful? Standards alone are not enough. We need to have a crystal clear vision of what it looks like to know when we get there. Here's Paula's language from the book. What would it look like when students can demonstrate that they understand the big ideas and have mastered the essential skills? That is, what are some ways they might demonstrate their capacity to use the newly learned concepts and information in a new situation? That's what Oval 2 is about, making it really, really clear before instruction happens about where it is we want to go, what it looks like, what a student should be able to do so that they both, you and the student, know they've got it, that they understand. The Oval 2 exploration that you do before planning will help you know what to do in that planning. Now, a standard alone tells you a lot about where you're heading, but it doesn't tell you everything. You need to flesh it out. Now, take, for example, one learning standard, a math one here. Find whole number quotients and remainders with up to 4-digit dividends and 1-digit divisors. Now, that's kind of math standards mumbo jumbo for, right, being able to divide. Now, one way you could assess this, right? You could just give the kids a problem. 72 divided by 2. Boom, that's it. That can give you information about whether or not they can divide. Or maybe the question is a little more thoughtful, a little more to it, such as, what is 42 divided by 3? Still division, still the same standard, but a little bit more complex. Here's an example of one that might be a little more complicated, but it'll give you information about whether or not the student can go beyond the algorithm, right? Something like this. There are 38 students on the bus. Half of them are girls. How many boys are on the bus? Or Enrique's restaurant seats 64. If the restaurant is arranged in tables of 4, how many tables are there? So you can see from that first one, about 72 divided by 2, to the last example I gave you, increasing complexity, it tells you a lot more about what a student knows and can do. It also would inform what you do to plan the lessons you're going to plan to get the kids there based on the question you ask. So it's that thoughtful analysis in Oval 2 that really puts some flesh on the bones that you're trying to achieve in your lessons and your unit. As a mentor, you can help your mentee to be very clear then about those that desire learning and do it before they plan anything. In addition to making that point about being very, very clear about the targets, you can also help your mentee just with their assessment practices. Now, depending on their teaching experience or their college preparation, they may or may not have a handle on best practices in assessment. The way I think of assessment, we're so busy, we've got so much we have to do. I think we have a finite amount of energy that we can dedicate to assessment, right? We've got a lot to do. If there's a limit on it, then we must be very careful about how we expend that energy. We want assessment that makes a difference. We want assessment that has an impact on student learning. You can help your mentee by making sure they're balanced in their assessment practices, using pre-assessment in order to know where students are in their readiness to learn, using formative assessment to monitor how the learning is progressing, employing common formative assessment with peers looking at student work together in order to plan and deliver the time and support that all students need to master the essentials, and summative assessment for grading and reporting progress and to assess the success of instructional strategies. We should have a balanced use of these different assessment practices. If you are getting signals, if you detect an imbalance of assessment on the part of your mentor, try to nudge them in the direction they need to go. Don't let them take a whole bunch of time on pre-assessment if they don't do anything about it and just keep going ahead the way that they intended. That's a waste of assessment energy. Don't let summative assessment, or worse yet, external summative assessment like state tests, take up too much assessment energy. And my last little bit of advice for you as a mentor is to help your mentor involve students in the assessment process. After all, both the student and the teacher need to know how the learning is progressing, right? Both need to know where they stand. Now, as you come to expect, JAMS has resources to help you help your mentee. From Why Didn't I Learn This in College? Maybe the two of you and some stickies and a highlighter could look at some of these pages together. There are pages in the book about checking for understanding, self-assessment, making assessment a learning experience, classroom assessment design basics, and a special tool at the end of that chapter, that section, making assessment a learning experience. These are great tools. Check them out. Not just you. How about you check them out together?
I love that idea, Jeff. I just want to mention too that if you've got your book, your blue book, Why Didn't I Learn This in College, in front of you, that section starts on page 142 and goes all the way to 168. So you can go on a scavenger hunt with your mentee throughout those pages. And as we move toward closure, I would take you back to your monthly mentoring guide. I hope you really are using that and don't skip those tips for you at the end of each guide. It's things for you to consider. We picked out 2 for you right now, and they might be the right 2 for you and they might not be. You'll have to look and see what else we've got there for you. But this is a time of year where sometimes Everyone's a little weary and ready for breaks, and all of a sudden the momentum shifts. We want to suggest that those days before a break don't be put on hold. They don't be put on sliding through activities that don't matter, that you guide your mentee to plan meaningful, engaging learning experiences right up to break. That doesn't mean that you can't have fun. We've got to build in fun all the time so kids have energy, but you want to maintain typical processes and procedures. And given the stress the holidays bring to some families, I think that continuity helps kids as they ready for a break too. So the second tip made me laugh. It is the dilemma of piles of paper that have accumulated on shelves, boxes, overflowing the teacher's desks or tables. And so it can be fun to give a gift of garbage bags and maybe even a set of brightly colored folders or 2 or 3 new 3-ring binders. Help your mentee figure out what to throw away, what to file. And when I say throw away, I mean recycle, and then what to file. So it will feel really good to come back to a clean and organized environment after the holiday. So with that said, next time you hear from us, it will be 2025 already. So we're going to close by saying, see you next year.